Welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guest, to do the same.
Each week we will pick a topic to discuss, sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that's probably going to be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends.
Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Malin.
And we're back for an exciting episode of Roundtable Mindset. We are going to talk all about perspectives because that seems to be the name of the game, right?
Has been so long, so far. So
not really perspectives, but kind of. I mean, we're kind of in this series, so I'm excited to continue that today. So, but before we get going in that, my friend, how's your week been?
Well, I have recently just gotten back from a work trip. So I had to fly out to New Jersey and New York to spend some time with my coworkers. We have a big event that gets done every 12 weeks or so. So about once a quarter, so 4 times a year. And all of the IT professionals come together and we do what's called PI planning, which is just a fancy term that we use to plan the work for a business for the next quarter. So was able to go and meet a lot of coworkers that I don't normally get to work with every day and see their faces and see their body language, which is kind of different because when you're remote, you don't really get a lot of those visual cues a lot of times because people don't turn on their cameras or you don't see their whole body or their whole room. So it was just nice to kind of be in the same space with everybody. And it's so funny that I have this preconceived notion of these individuals that I've never actually seen in person because we've had some new team members come. And when you see them in person, just their mannerisms and how they act starts changing how you looked at them. At least it did for me. And they start kind of what I thought their personality would be starts shifting because you get more inputs from them other than just their voice on a phone call. So that was kind of fun. So yeah, I went and spent a few days in New Jersey, New York area. I had a really good time, had some really good food. Can't wait to do it again in the next 3 months. So what about you? What's been going on with you?
Well, not a whole lot. I think this weekend has been really nice just to be able to like slow down. And I have this funny thing. So my daughter has decided to take on a second job and she had to work and we went to breakfast and then we decided just spur of the moment, we were going to go to a movie. We haven't been to a movie in a long time. And my daughter was like, why do you always choose to do those things? Like, if we could just plan, I could come with you. I'm like, things are different now, dear. Like, we can spontaneously just decide to go to a movie and it's okay, so, here we are still trying to figure out what this looks like in the whole post-high school, moved back home sort of thing. But
back off, daughter. You're cramping my style now.
Oh, no, it was good. We saw a really great flick. I don't know. I realized I love Mark Wahlberg on the screen much better than I did in a boy band. So it was a Mark Wahlberg movie. It was so good. So good. I enjoy him.
What was the name of the movie?
It was called Arthur the King. So if you have a desire to go to a movie where you get to cry because there's a puppy with a happy ending, I'm just going to put that out there because I remember getting to the part where there was the happy ending and I literally looked at Doyle and was like, oh, thank God. Because oh, thank God. Because I don't know that I could have handled like a Marley and Me ending. So it was good. But
well, I hate when animals, like I'm not a huge animal lover per se. I mean, I don't hate animals, but I have a cat and that's about it. And once the cat goes on to the great beyond, we're done with animals. But I tell you, when you see an animal get either abused or hurt in the movies, it just makes me mad. Like it just ruins even if it's a small part of the entire movie, it just ruins the whole movie because that's all you can think about is like, why did that have to happen? And so I'm glad it was a happy ending for you, because if it wasn't, I could see how that would have just made that whole experience completely different.
Well, and even leaving the theater, like, I'm like, let's go home to Cooper. I just want to go home to Cooper. Ridiculous. My dog was at home. He was fine. It's not like, but it did. I don't know. It must be like just, I must have just needed to cry because it just made like all of the things. I was like, oh my God, that's so sweet. Or, oh my God, that's so sad. It
has nothing to do with the dog or with you. It's like something unrelated. And Jamie's like, I just need this. Leave me alone.
Quite frankly, seriously though, that has happened to me lots of times over the years. Like, I have been hyper emotional and for whatever reason, I couldn't get it out, and I watched the right movie and it's just like the floodgate, you know what I mean? And then it feels so much better afterwards. So sometimes we just need a good cry.
Did you just ask the emotionally dead person in the room if I understood about just watching a movie that makes you cry? No, I don't understand.
You are not emotionally dead.
I do not understand that. Actually, I do. This would be a nice little segue. I do have a food for thought question for you that has something to do. Maybe it doesn't really have to do with emotions, but maybe it does. I don't know. Let me ask you my question. So here's my food for thought. We all have heard the negative effects that stress has on our bodies, right? And we all try to do things to eliminate or reduce stress in our lives. And we go to the doctors and they tell us, hey, you have to reduce your stress. It's bad for your heart. And all of that is true. But here's my question for you, Jamie. Can stress ever be a benefit to someone's life?
The instant answer is no. Right? Because so long, I feel like I work in mental health and wellness, right? So I feel like we probably have a different view on that, but I do feel like so much energy is spent on reducing stress, right? Like, how do you reduce your stress? And I feel like several years ago, there was a shift where it's less reducing your stress and more coping with your stress, right? And I watched this really good TED Talk probably 3 or 4 years ago. I love TED Talks. I'm kind of nerdy that way. As a matter of fact, when researching our topic today, I utilized the TED Talks quite a bit for that. But a few years ago, when they started shifting from reducing your stress to coping with your stress, I found this TikTok, and she was talking about how stress is what makes us grow. And it really kind of hit home for me after thinking about all the times that I have made major life changes or major growth points. It's been because what was happening before wasn't working for me anymore. And that I realized that I was causing myself more harm by doing those things rather than changing those things. And so, and how do you come to that? You come to that from a place of hurt, from a place of brokenness, from a place of, emptiness, and that's what precipitates change. So, I really feel like stress is good for that purpose, that you really can grow and change from that. However, I will also say that there have been lots of times where if I'm not addressing the stress very well, that really can be harmful. I mean, there's some serious physical effects from having too much stress and not dealing with it well. So I don't remember who it was. We had someone come to our staff meeting once and talk about stress. And they were talking about how like your stress kind of centers in a place. And they told us just stop and close your eyes and feel your body. And I'm like, oh, yep, right there. It's always in my shoulders, like the back of my shoulders. And so it's been interesting to think about it that way also to help me kind of recognize it and then try and do something different to shift it. So I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag for me, I think. Like sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, right?
Well, the question stemmed from a situation that sounds very similar to yours. Mine was a work that's happened a few years back, and they came in and they talked about how to deal with pressure and stresses at work. And one of the catchphrases that the speaker had, because although this is not stress is good for you instead of bad for you. The negative stress, the negative effects that stress has on us is factual, and we shouldn't stay in that space very long. And that's the big difference is stress in short amounts can be beneficial. And I'll get that in a second. But when you're in there for a long period of time, it can have some serious health effects to your body. So I'm not sitting here, what I'm about to say, and argue that stress is good for you, not by any means. But there are some benefits with it. So if I go back to that conversation I was having at work, one of the catchphrases the speaker has is, you can't make diamonds without a lot of pressure. And at work, stress and pressure, how you navigate through that, you'll come out stronger, harder, more resilient. Basically think of yourselves as coming out as diamonds, which I thought was kind of clever. But for this conversation, Jamie, I wanted to know if there was any, other than our opinions, although I think they're great. I was curious, is there any real facts behind, can stress be beneficial? And I found one article that I'm just going to share some tidbits. And again, it all comes back to, if you're in there in a short period of time, stress can boost your job performance while increasing your alertness. Healthy amounts of stress can even help build relationships, essentials for our health. Stress is also vital for our memory, which I didn't think about. But the example that it gave was, have you ever as a kid put your hand on a hot stove, or you touched something you weren't supposed to, and you suddenly learn a very important lesson, and that kind of sticks with you? So that's kind of what they're talking about. I'll go in, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to give highlights. Stress also can help us link those consequences to our actions that I was talking about. It also helps us with our memory, and it can boost our performance. So if we're in a stressful situation, we may be able to act faster or think through things a little bit sharper. Our focus and attention are also heightened in times of stress. And so there's a positive impact to that. And then also, going through stress is a way for you to build your resiliency. So maybe stressful situations, I'm not going to say there's not every situation becomes stressful. So what you used to think was stressful maybe 6 months ago, after going through it, you may be met with the same challenges today, and it's not as stressful because you've built some of that resiliency. So I thought those were kind of interesting to at least think about, in terms of, wow, stress can have some positive impacts to us. Again, as long as we're not in there for a long period of time, because there are so many negative health effects if you're in a large amount of stress. But I thought it was an interesting read anyways. Interesting question.
What's interesting, and I hadn't even thought of this, but that's kind of, I always say I do my best work when I've procrastinated it. Like, and I hate to, it sounds so terrible. And I hate that about myself. Like, I hate that I procrastinate big projects. And I think that's like perfectionistic procrastination or something like that. I think there's a title to it, but it's because I'm like, I get nervous to start a project because I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to nail it. You know what I mean? So then I put it off. And then at the end, I feel sharp and I feel ready, but I'm super pressured and like, it's a lot of stress at that time. But it seems to be the way I work best with those bigger kind of projects. So.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I've witnessed this firsthand. My wife, there's some things that she does put off, and I think it's because it's prioritization. And I've been kind of talking with her about this too, especially when this question came up. And I said, if we just kind of look at it, I front load my stress. She backloads hers. And what that really means is, I'm the one that will start on a project really early on and get nowhere because I'm stressing about it and I'm trying, and I'll pile all that stress up on me at the very beginning of it. And then as I'm working through it, I'll figure out a path, and then the stress diminishes, and then I get to my end goal, probably around the same time the due date is. My wife will also approach it in her own way, which is she might not even think about it at the beginning. And when I say think about it, it appears to me, because she's not doing the same actions I would do, but she's thinking about it in her mind. She's organizing in that way, but she's not taking any action. And when she starts taking action, it's closer to that deadline. So then she has the stress of, I need to get this done. But the ultimate reality is we both get the same thing done on the same time. It's just, how do you handle your stress? I, not being a procrastinator in this situation, I front load my stress and I work through it. And then I carry it through about the midway point until I have a good plan in place, and then I execute. My wife like backloads her stress. So she's thinking about it, puts a good plan together. And then while she's executing it, that's where the stress comes in because she's working against that deadline. But I tell you what, I've seen it firsthand, very sharp, very clear, making really fast decisions. And I think it's because there's not that time to stew and think about it like I give myself. So am I saying procrastination's good or bad? I think we should probably throw that term out. And I'm taking a little segue here. I think it's just a matter of how people choose to work. And I don't think any one person always does it one way or the other, but I don't think it's necessarily bad to be a procrastinator, as I'm using air quotes, because I think there's some people that's their method. That's how they work through and they accomplish their work. And it doesn't make them lazy or doing it last minute. It's their method. And I don't think we should discount that. I think we should recognize that as that works for them for a variety of reasons, that it may not work for me, but that doesn't make me right and them wrong.
Right. Unless you're working on the same project and then it's just stressful the entire time, and that might not be as fun. So,
well, if you have two of those people that work on the same project, the work would get really evened out, right? You start on it, get it halfway there. I'll pick it up and I'll take it the rest of the way home. Very balanced. No, but I just thought that was a kind of an interesting, stress. You just hear stress and you instantly go negative, and there's a little bit of benefits to it. And I thought it was kind of cool to listen to and read about.
Well, and I think the way we frame it is so important too. And that's really what that TikTok that I had mentioned was about, was, how the language you use around it and how you frame it can really shift the way you feel it and the way it affects you. If you look at it as a growth opportunity rather than this terrible situation, then it might be easier to utilize it for good. It's good stuff. Well, thanks for bringing that today.
No problem.
Good. Yes. So today we're kind of continuing on our path as we, kind of come to an end of the very first year of our very first podcast together, all about mindset and perspectives and things like that. We were really looking at, we were talking about how do we come to our perspective, right? And really looking back at this last year and how we've grown and shifted and changed and learned, and wanted to kind of share that with you and make it more, I guess, explicit, right? Like to really kind of put an exclamation point on it. So we were talking about like how we come to our perspectives, and as we started talking about that, we learned that there's just a lot of pieces to this. So we've kind of decided to turn it into a little mini series. So this is kind of part 2 of the perspectives, like how we come to our perspectives and what that looks like. So do you want to talk a little bit about the focus this time of part 2, my friend?
Yeah, so part 2, as Jamie and I were breaking down this simple term of perspective and how we get and I say that with as much sarcasm as I can muster, it comes across. What makes up our perspective? How do we share our perspective? Why is it important? What's the difference? There's a lot of pieces to this, and I'm going to be the first one to say we are focusing on echo chambers today. I hate to speak for both of us, Jamie, but I'm just going to say we both recognize the importance and the severity of staying within an echo chamber, either willingly or unwillingly. And when we were doing our conversation around how do we even shape these conversations, I think this bubbled up to the top really fast. Mm-hmm. One thing that I was not prepared for, though, is as I was digging in and learning, challenging what I thought an echo chamber was, defining it, seeing all the components to it, the attributes. This is one that I still have not gotten to the center of what echo chambers are. So when we talk today, I feel like, at least from my perspective, as I'm still kind of scratching the surface, maybe I'm below surface level at this point, But my point to that is there's so much to it and there's so much to learn and talk about that I don't feel comfortable even in this conversation saying I have my hands wrapped around in completely what an echo chamber is or the effects that it has, which is kind of difficult because I really wanted to have a full understanding of what an echo chamber is or how it is used. And I don't think I'm quite there yet because it is so expansive. I don't know if you agree or if you found something different in your research, if you feel like you have a better handle on it than I do, but there's just so much to it.
Well, I would like to say that I have a better handle on it than you, but I don't know if that's true. I think what's interesting about this topic in general, or maybe more specifically, is that this is kind of what we've been aiming to do for the last year, like breaking the echo chamber to say, hey, it's important to hear something outside of what it is that you think, right? And we've spent so much time doing that. And yet here we are feeling like, oh my gosh, there's still so much that I don't understand about this topic in particular. And so, and this kind of went hand in hand for me too with like self-censorship, right? So as we kind of dig in, those two things went together for me in that I think there's echo chambers that we find ourselves in. I often call them the rabbit holes, the YouTube rabbit holes, right? And then there's the echo chambers that we create by censoring the information that we're taking in on purpose, like doing that ourselves. And so that's kind of where we started with this. Now, I went to, like I said earlier, I went to YouTube and did some TED Talks. Like I love TED Talks because of the perspective that you can gain from other people, right? You can hear their thoughts or their experiences and their I guess translation of their experiences. And one of the TED Talks that I watched was about echo chambers and breaking echo chambers. And let me share the name of this one. It was called Challenge the Echo Chamber with Adam Greenwood. He shared this interesting thought, and I had never thought of this. He was talking about how he went, do you remember the Google glasses, like the smart glasses?
Yep.
I mean, that was years ago, right? And he was like, that it really didn't take off. And here we are sitting today with 12 or 14 patents being registered currently. And the thought is that millions of Americans will be wearing these smart glasses in just a few years. And he said, if you think about putting on your smart glasses and you go to the grocery store and you're looking around the grocery store and you see the Quaker Oats with the halo, the glowing halo, because you bought Quaker Oats the last 2 times you were at the store, and certainly you might want to purchase them again. And you continue walking down the aisle and you see these things that are related to things that you've purchased, or they are things that you've purchased in the past. And then you see something that you've never seen before that also has the glowing halo, because that's what the store wants you to buy. And that's already happening to us. You know what I mean? I was just on one of my grocery shopping apps this weekend, and I was going to check out, and it said, hey, do you want any of these things that you've purchased multiple times? So we're getting that in our screen already. But, to think about that was kind of a new thought. And then he said, now imagine going to the coffee shop and you're looking around the coffee shop with your smart glasses on, and you've got the white halo around this gentleman sitting at the table because you might really get along with that person. And then you see another one with another or white halo around them because you could really get along with that person. And imagine that your Google glasses completely block out who you might not get along with based on your search histories and your social media interactions and things like that. Like it just erases it completely from your view. And I thought that was such a great example of echo chambers in technology and how we are experiencing these echo chambers currently in social media, in our search engines. How often do we say the word? I remember a few years ago, Doyle and I were looking at an Instant Pot, and we were talking about it one evening, and then every ad that came up on my phone was to purchase an Instant Pot, And my YouTube videos were Instant Pot recipes and things like that. It's kind of, we're experiencing this now. And I think we're experiencing it in ways that we don't even realize we're experiencing it. And to think about my glasses blocking out an entire person that I might not get along with because their algorithm looks different than mine was a little shocking to me, like to stop and think about that,
Yeah, and you've touched on a lot of really good examples. And to me, it's like it's taking that internal decisions that we make every day and making it an external contraption to do it for us, basically. And I think a lot of people don't want to lose control. I think that's where I think if we all take a step back for a second and really analyze that, I think that's where we have problems, is not the fact that it's doing that or it's not the fact that that's happening through this device. It's that it's doing it for us, because I think there's a certain level of control we all want to feel with that regard. But before I continue down that rabbit trail, I just kind of want to pull us back for a second, Jamie, because I don't know, maybe our listeners would prefer kind of having a base to start off, because I know I did. When I was talking about echo chambers, I was like, what does that mean? So if you can indulge me for just a second and let me go back for just a quick minute, I would like to define what echo chambers are, and I'd like to see if you have a different definition by chance. I'm going to share my definition of what I thought one was before I started reading and looking into some articles. It hasn't changed too much. There is one aspect of it, though, that I was not thinking about that this definition kind of brings up. So here is the definition that I found. Echo chambers are spaces, often virtual, consisting of like-minded individuals that share their beliefs and often eliminate differing voices and opposing viewpoints. These spaces can confirm people's existing beliefs, and therefore they are likely to believe and share information in these spaces. These spaces are also a place for hyperpartisanship, not objective or rooted in fact, or political ideology. They are often rigid, strongly biased, and attacks other viewpoints. My viewpoint on that was a little bit different when I started than what it is now. And I know I just said that I was going to give mine first, and I didn't. I jumped into what I read. But my viewpoint was, I thought an echo chamber was, I am just limiting the amount of information that's coming into my viewpoint. If it doesn't agree with what I think the world should look like, then it's wrong, and then I'm casting it out. I'm not looking at it. I did a lot of that when I was younger than I am trying to do now. But do you have a different definition of echo chamber, or is that kind of falling in line with what you're thinking?
Well, I think if I were to go just down the route of echo chamber, then I think I had a similar viewpoint of it. I think now I have more, like, I'm seeing echo chamber and self-censorship as two separate things, because if you think of an echo, I say something and I hear it back, right? That's what an echo is. And so to me, it's like surrounding myself with all of these people that are just going to repeat back what I say and affirm everything that I already believe and think. And self-censorship is, me deciding not to go seek other things. The more research, and again, I always use the word research lightly because I'm not a scientist and I don't have a control study and things like that. But in the reading and looking that I did, it was like, I think what's interesting is that I feel like we have a little less say in that, and that is happening to us more than we are making that happen. And so I don't know what word it is that I'm trying to use, and so I think what's interesting is that it's happening, and I don't know that we realized it was happening. You know what I mean? I had mentioned before, when you and I were chatting about this idea that there have been times where we can see in history people were censored, right? Like the media was controlled by the government, and it was an echo chamber that was created by someone else. And I almost feel like this has happened over a period of time, and it's almost insidious because of algorithms and because of, the way social media works. It's grown around us and we didn't realize it was happening. And so I have this new awareness of it, I think, that is kind of alarming to know that I really can be susceptible to this sort of thing. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And I have again, I've learned new terminologies. I've used one, which again, when I have a new word that I haven't been exposed to, it's hard for me to even say the word out loud. But I just mentioned it in my earlier definition, and I'm going to try to say it again. It's hyperpartisanship, which is a sharply polarized situation in which political parties are in fierce disagreement with each other. Communication that is regularly tied to hyperpartisanship had a ton of emotions, using swear words, exclamation points, etc. So that is a new type of word that I have not experienced before or even thought about. But doesn't that sound like today's landscape with our political parties?
I was going to say,
I mean, honestly,
you've never experienced that before, or we live in that?
Well,
I mean, that's kind of what we're living in.
We live in that. I just have a word for it now. I didn't know there was a word for it.
I didn't either. The
other things that I want to touch on as we're kind of continuing to go through this, because I think not that I am, again, I am not an expert and I am just learning this, Jamie. So I don't even know if I'm using these right, but you were referencing echo chambers and kind of self-censorship. And there's there's another new term that came in. Have you ever heard of an epistemic bubble?
No.
Yeah, I've never either.
Maybe I have, but I don't know what it is. Do you have a definition for that one?
Yeah, so I have well, it's not a definition, but it's kind of a difference between an epistemic bubble and an echo chamber. So when insiders aren't exposed to people on the other side, they create an epistemic bubble. So that bubble is you're only having information that is from your side. You're not looking for other viewpoints. So I think it's a more specific. So echo chambers, we were kind of probably throwing everything in the kitchen sink underneath echo chambers. What this is telling me is that there's two distinctions. A bubble, this epistemic bubble, is one where you are not allowing outside influence in, and that you're only keeping your own points of view, and you're only talking to people that are aligned in your points of view, and you're only looking at material that aligns with what you believe. That's what I'm starting to see as this epistemic bubble. An echo chamber, it goes on and says, when insiders begin to distrust everyone on the outside, they create an echo chamber. Now, that's the one that I have a little bit of, like, I was shocked when I read that because, and of course, you know me, I wanted to challenge. I'm like, no. It's not that I don't distrust people. But then when I start reflecting on my own, how many times have I heard an idea or been presented with a thought that is something I've never thought of before or is contradictory to things that I hold true? What is my gut? My go-to move? Is my go-to move to accept that or at least listen to them and say, oh, they have a new point. How interesting. Or is it for me to shut them down and prove how wrong they are? It's for me to shut them down and prove how wrong they are. And so to me, these two things together create the environment that I think we all try to get out of and we try to avoid. But I've never heard of the epistemic bubble before. I just read that because I just want there to be, for our conversation, an awareness that there's something like that out there, and that an echo chamber is more than just a place where we just don't allow new ideas to come in. There seems to be an element where you build this up because you're not trusting or you have a distrust for the other side or the people that think differently than you, and you're almost creating this environment where they're not part of it, is how I'm reading this. And I have more as we keep going, but I'm going to let you respond to that because that was kind of a big moment for me when I was doing my reading and my research, was this whole distrust element. I never stopped and thought about that before.
Well, and I think we almost see that running rampant in different, we touched on conspiracy theories during Talk About It Tuesday one week. And, this idea that there's like Pizzagate and, some of that kind of stuff, those are like fear mongering. How often have we heard about fear mongering in the political landscape? I think that's part of that is that's how we create that distrust. That's how we decide, like, I can't vote based on your political party because I don't trust you because you believe differently than me. I guess I didn't realize that was a specific a specific type of, I don't know. I guess I didn't realize that that was part of echo chambers. I felt like that was just kind of like a byproduct of that kind of thought process. You know what I'm saying? And as much as I like to think that I'm super open-minded and enlightened and elevated above all of it, yet I can't help but recognize those times that my own personal thoughts and biases really can creep in and cause problems for myself in those spaces too. But I guess I don't feel like that's the end of it. You know what I mean? I feel like what makes me enlightened, which sounds so big-headed, but one of the things that contributes to my ability in not getting stuck there is the idea that I'm looking for that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to recognize when I'm there and work my way through that and not stay there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it does make sense. And as I continue to try to figure out, because to me, if I'm a visual person and I'm thinking there's this echo chamber that we're all sitting in, well, no, I'm going to say me, I'm going to say all, I'm sitting in. And yes, I'm hearing my thoughts and my stuff coming back. This would be an extra layer of almost insulation, this epistemic bubble, which is that's where all I'm feeding myself. I'm not able to even look outside of this echo chamber that I'm in because the only sources of material that I'm even consuming are the ones that keep me in that echo chamber. There's no opportunity for me to learn about anything else that may have me peek my head out to say, oh, there's a whole world out here beyond what I just think, feel, know that I should be aware of. I stay in my little echo chamber and I'm all wrapped up in my own, same like-minded individuals, the same social media, all of it. And so one, I think, feeds into the other. I have an example for you, and it's going to make your little blue heart swell. It is about Republicans. So but I think it's a good example of what, when we're talking about this epistemic bubble and echo chambers, how the two kind of coincide. So there is a book written back in 2008 called The Echo Chamber by Kathleen Hall Jameson and Joseph Capella. And they examined the right-wing media echo chamber. So that was the whole book was the right-wing echo chamber. And they claimed that Rush Limbaugh and Fox News systematically manipulated their fans' trust. Limbaugh portrayed the world as a battle between good and evil. Those on Limbaugh's side were reliable. Outsiders were malicious and untrustworthy. So in there, you're talking about how they're already setting the stage. The echo chamber is causing distrust for anybody that's not siding with them. And then their information that they're feeding themselves and their group of people that you have to, take in as gospel, basically, is what is that epistemic bubble. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I know they go hand in hand, but one thing that I found that really helped me going between the two is think of it this way. Nobody can hear outside of that epistemic bubble, and an echo chamber will discredit outside voices. So if you're within that bubble, you're not hearing outside voices. If you make it outside that bubble and you're in the echo chamber, you're going to discredit those outside voices because they're getting into you, they're getting in, but you're discrediting them. You're not believing them, which I thought, that's kind of the difference we're talking about, which is brand new. Again, it's all fascinating to me.
If I think about that example, what's interesting is how it's like we're doing it to ourselves and it's being done to us. You know what I mean? And I think to avoid some massive conspiracy theory, that's not where I'm at. But I think it's been happening as a way to give us what we want. The internet has given us what we want. And I also think that we accept what we see far too easily. And I think we don't scrutinize what we're seeing enough. What's always been interesting to me is how Fox News and CNN used to be like news sources. And so I think so many people still look to them as news sources. And the majority of what I see on both of those stations is really opinion. It's editorial, and we're taking it as news. And I don't know that anybody notices. You know what I mean? I think there's some people that notice, but most people are like, no, they even call it Fox News, CNN. I don't remember CNN, what that stands for, but something news network, right?
Yeah. Well, and as I was thinking through this, it's almost like people that are in echo chambers, and I'm going to put myself in there because I believe the more I'm looking into this, the more I realize there's echo chambers in everywhere. I mean, I've heard you say this before in social media, and I was like, yeah, okay, Jamie. Then you start thinking about it and you're like, my algorithms feed me things that I like and continue to send me things. It's more of like a marketing tool, but actually what it's happening is it's eliminating the opportunity unless I go purposely and look for things that are against what I believe to be true. Or, hey, I've heard this fact. Let me go see if there's another side of it. And that's what this podcast has really helped with for me, is it gives me it makes me go and look at both sides of the coin, because again, we're all about how do we change our perspective. And I'll get to some steps that we can do in just a little bit. But when I was thinking through this, the analogy that comes to my mind is it's almost like we're building a prison for ourselves, but we have every comfort that we've ever wanted built within this prison. We're comfortable. We have everything that we need, and there's really no desire to get out of it, because why would we? There's nothing out there outside of this little chamber that I've created. There is nothing out there that will give me the same comfort that I have now. And that's a hard thing to fight against, because there's some people, I truly believe, they don't know that they are in an echo chamber. I'm going to put myself in that category. There's some people that are aware they are in an echo chamber. I'm also going to put myself in that category, because there's some things that I have recognized that I'm like, I need to broaden my horizons and broaden my perspective. We've talked about that previously. But there are situations where I feel like, nope, I am good. And then when I really start looking at it, there are things that are still I'm surrounding myself with, and I'm not allowing those other thoughts and ideas to even come in. And one of the things that have helped me in my, adventure here of trying to broaden my perspective is I've had to learn that just because I learn about other people and all other people's cultures or beliefs or political views, that doesn't mean that I have to adopt them. And that doesn't mean I have to agree with them. But what I should do is at least listen to them to see why they think or believe or, go after the things that they go after, because it's enriching. There's always something you walk away with. And we've said that multiple times. But these chambers that we put ourselves in, these echo chambers, that doesn't even give us a chance to do that. And I think for the individuals that are in them, that they are not aware, they don't even know that it's happening to them. And so how do you fight against something that people are comfortable in and they don't know that they're in them? And that is very difficult. That is extremely difficult.
Well, and no wonder it's so hard then to have those conversations, to be able to come to a conversation with someone you don't agree with. We haven't practiced that in a long time in this country, I believe. I remember one of my favorite nerdy things to do in high school, well, really middle school, was to talk politics with the local far right-wing friend of mine. You and I used to do it. You know what I'm saying? And we used to be able to have those conversations, and we can't anymore. And I think this is a big reason why, because we've built, like you said, we've built these little prisons around ourselves where we have everything we need. We have everything we want. And it's okay in my posh little cell to just exist there. And I'm so grateful to be aware of that enough to seek out the iron that can sharpen me. You know what I'm saying? The place where
Right.
I can go and challenge myself and feel a little uncomfortable, because that's where I grow. Just like we talked about earlier with the stress, that's where we grow, is those spaces of discomfort.
Well, and I actually have a term for that if you want to. So I've found one of the things, so I'll just get into the list now. So things that we can ask ourselves if we think we're in an echo chamber. I found a list. One of the things, and I'm going to jump right to it, is what you're talking about, and it's called constructive controversy. So one of the things that we need to do if we think you want to avoid being in an echo chamber is practice constructive controversy. And what that looks like, and there's some phrases here they're kind of lame, but they serve the purpose. Say things like, I'd love to hear more about why you feel that way. Or, this is a safe space. We don't all have to agree all the time. I'd love to learn more from you. Or, I respect that you feel that way. This is what I was thinking. And so as much of those are kind of like canned responses, and I shouldn't say nobody, a lot of people won't use those. The spirit of them is there, which is be open enough to say, hey, I'm not agreeing with you, but I don't want to shut you down because I want to hear more. But then have the respect of the individual too, and I would say of yourself, to then listen to their perspective. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a really great phrase, is constructive controversy, because we almost avoid controversy at all costs in this country now. And you can do it in a civil manner, and you can do it in a constructive manner. At least that should be our goal. Disagreements aren't necessarily bad. It's how we respond to them or how they get escalated, in my opinion, which is what makes them horrible. But disagreements happen all the time. And when you don't see eye to eye and you have those conversations, to me, that's a much more enriching conversation than if I'm just talking to someone who tells me everything that I'm telling to them and they believe it and they send it back to me. Yeah, it might sound really good, but it's really not doing anything for me. It's not broadening my perspective. It's not giving me new learnings. It's not challenging what I believe. It's just giving me back what I'm sending out into the world. So I thought that was really great. A couple more while I'm on a roll here. You should ask yourself, make it a habit of checking the multiple news sources to ensure you're getting complete objective information. Let's just stay with CNN and Fox News. There's a lot of times I just look at Fox News. Well, why not see what CNN is saying, or go to another third party? Maybe it's outside of both of those, and just see if they have something, their articles are saying similar things, or if something new's there. I need to get better at doing that for myself. Seeking out people who have different perspectives than you. This is a big one. This is one that I love doing, and this happened in college. We've talked about that. Take care to discuss new ideas and facts with people, and be patient with them and be respectful. And then this one I thought was a really good one, and I put this in here for you, Jamie. I don't know why, but it just hit my ear. It says, remember that just because you want something to be true doesn't make it fact. And I think that's a powerful one. I think that's one that if we all came into conversations thinking there's something I can learn from this individual, we would have so many better conversations, and people's attitudes around having conversations with individuals that don't think like you or maybe have opposing views would be a lot more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the other side of that coin is also to remember that someone with a different opinion doesn't have to hurt you. You know what I mean? I think we often get stuck in spaces where those conversations are difficult because we take it personally, because we can't see that at the end of the day, Malin, as much as you are my very best friend in the whole world, and the fact that you don't agree with me doesn't have to hurt me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand sometimes why, because even when you and I get really charged up in a conversation, like, why does that matter? Like, why does it matter that he doesn't agree with me? And it really does take some effort to step outside of that and be like, you know what? I can still have my opinion and still think that you're wrong. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have to hurt. And I don't know that we always remember that.
Oh, we don't. I'm gonna finish that with we don't. We've had our fair share of conversations of. I know not so long ago we had a pretty heated debate where we pretty much went radio silent on one another for a couple days. But that's what we do, right? Like, we cooled down, we came back, and then we were like, yep, that was kind of silly. Why did we let that get so heated? But we found a way, which I think a lot of people need to do, is we found a way to say it doesn't destroy the relationship. It may make us take a break because, hey, I just need a minute. And we've learned how each other needs a minute, and we give each other that time. But we both know that that's not saying this has destroyed the friendship and there's no coming back. It's just, no, this is how we manage it. And there's so many people in my life that can't do that with me. And I don't know if it's because the friendship isn't as close, or they're not able to do it, Or maybe unknowingly, they're sitting in an echo chamber, and unknowingly, I'm sitting in an echo chamber, and it's just not allowing those other thoughts to come in. I don't know, whatever the case is, but I do think that if you can find I think marriage is a good example of that. I have this with my wife. I think I have this with you as a really close friend. I think you need to have people or relationships in your life where you have that space that you can have these types of conversations and know that it doesn't mean the end if you disagree, or even if you get to the point where it's heated and you need to walk away for a little bit. But that doesn't mean don't continue to try to have these types of conversations. I think they're important. And I'm a big champion of doing these. I think always trying to see the other point of view is important. And having these types of conversations are very valuable. And I look back and I look at the growth that I've experienced in my life since I've started, trying to get out of these bubbles and echo chambers that I'm in. And some of the past relationships that have been destroyed because I sat in my bubble content to be there, versus some of the relationships that I've made getting out of those echo chambers. I just wish I would have done that a little bit sooner in my life. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate that I spent as much time as I did being isolated in my own ideology.
Yeah. I guess in the reading that I did, one of the things that they talked about was how important it is for us to be able to learn how to question and scrutinize the information that we're intaking, how to filter it and understand what the source is. Also look for those implicit biases that might be in what we're ingesting as far as information goes. And then making sure that we know how to seek out other ideas. One interesting thing one person had talked about was how years ago, when we were getting all of our news on paper, or even, in magazines and things like that, is that you'd go to the newsstand and you had to look at all the papers and choose which one you were going to pick up. So at least you had the option. You knew that there was more information out there than what you had. And sometimes I think we forget that there is more out there. There's a whole, what do they say? There's two sides to every story. There's three sides to every story. It's not just two. There's what you see, what I see, and then what really happened in the middle, right? And I think that we forget sometimes that my experience is not necessarily the only factor in that. And so, knowing how to find that information, I have done that. I have gotten off of my CNN and over to Fox News. And I don't think that even is the best idea for me, because it's just the opposite. That's it's like putting myself in someone else's echo chamber with a sledgehammer to break up everything that frustrates me, right? I think I need to go and find the factual things. I need to go and find the news source that's going to give me a different set of lenses to look through things, not necessarily more opinion. I need to know what the other side perceives as the facts, but not necessarily like a commentary about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you just touched on one that I think we are going to have to break open and do as we continue this series. But you made me think about this. In my true crime shows, even, you have eyewitnesses. And the police won't just go to one person and say, tell me what happened, and that's it. They canvass the area, because every single person who saw the same event take place has a different variation of what happened. And when you put all of those together, that third point of view, my point of view, your point of view, and what really happened, they try to get as close to that view of what really happened. And they have to do that by canvassing and getting as many eyewitness testaments or testimonies as possible. And then they put them together. And when you put all of those viewpoints together, you start getting a glimpse of what really did happen. And this is a prime example of what you're talking about. And when perspective versus perception, how do those two work together? That is definitely one I think we should crack open and talk about in more detail as we continue the series, because I think that is very, very important. And they're similar enough, but they're different, that I know as I'm even talking now, it's hard for me to put my thumb on why they're different, but I know that they are. But I think that would be a really great part of this series, Jamie.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I want to touch on as I'm looking at the time, and I know we're getting close, is, we've talked about echo chambers and we've talked about what they are and these epistemic bubbles and a lot of new terminology. I wanted to know, how do you avoid or stay away from echo chambers? And, for us that maybe don't think we're in them or we know they're in them, I think this list will help. And so I want to just really go through just quickly and touch on some of these because I think they're interesting and they're good tools to maybe for us to begin breaking down some of these chambers. And I do want to make a little caveat that there is no foolproof plan. Like there's not a secret sauce to say you follow these 3 things and you won't ever find yourself trapped in an echo chamber, or you've never placed yourself in an echo chamber. But I think they're good for us to keep in our mind and use them as tools to possibly start recognizing when we are or see echo chambers and how we can avoid them. So one of the best ways we can do is become a critical thinker. So you mentioned this earlier on, ask questions. Don't be afraid that when you encounter some new information, ask some questions, probe a little bit, look at it from multiple perspectives, try to understand that what's being presented to you, why is this fact or what makes it fact? I thought that was really, part of my job is I go in and have to ask 100 different questions just to understand exactly what they want to have happen. And that has served me very well in doing some of this perspective shifting, is because it is already in me to say, okay, that's what you're telling me, but why are you telling me it that way? And is this the only way this can happen? So critical thinking and asking questions, really huge. Another one is, again, making sure we're checking the news sources or the sources that we're getting this information. If we're hearing it from a friend, check it with a news article, or go and if you see it in a news article, check something that a news article that maybe you don't normally follow, just to say, hey, is this the same narrative or is it changing? That would also help you. Interacting with people from a variety of backgrounds, some people that, maybe you wouldn't necessarily associate with them. I'm not saying people, that live dangerous lifestyles or anything, but go with somebody and have a conversation with them. If they view things a little bit differently or they have a different walk of life, don't shy away from them. Go and ask them some questions.
One interesting thing that I got in one of the TED Talks I was watching is he had talked about how there has been over time even physical location shifting, so that he specifically pointed out Republicans like going to the same state because it's more conservative, and how that has shifted the landscape and really even physically, we can put ourselves in those spaces where we're in these little bubbles. And I thought that was really interesting because I have often, my big blue heart in the middle of my super conservative state, I often feel like I'm this, I don't know, like port in a storm or something. I don't know what the word is, but I'm out here all by myself and I don't have a lot of people who are similar to me in my political and social views. And that's really difficult. But how dangerous is it to be in a space where you're all together and there's no one to challenge what you think and what you believe either? You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting. I feel like we can do this digitally, but we can also do it physically. And I hadn't thought of that until that gentleman had mentioned that.
Well, and one thing I know we haven't had a chance to really dive in and sink our teeth into, the self censorship. But one of the things that I did read, and I just want to call out here because I think it falls in line with your example, is when people are feeling isolated or they're feeling like they're by themselves, when they are presented with an opportunity to share an opposing point of view, a lot of times people won't. And that is also a form of self-censorship. Because you have knowledge or an experience or an opinion that differs from somebody else, if you're withholding that from a conversation because of societal peer pressures, or maybe you think you're the only one out there, so you don't say anything, and that's something that, we should all try not to do, but can feed into us being in some of those echo chambers and some of these bubbles that we find ourselves in. So I just wanted to say that because we haven't given it a fair shot here. I think there's a lot that can be said about censorship and why people do it, and we're not touching on it because this topic is so big. But I just wanted to give it a nod. And one last thing that I want to leave with, Jamie, is when I was doing my research and one thing kind of came to the surface. It's a term, again, I hadn't heard before. It's called motivated belief. Have you heard that term used before?
No, I'm intrigued.
So motivated belief, from where I got it, is it's where a person believes something because they want it to be true, not necessarily because that belief is supported by facts or other evidence. And so one of the ways that we can avoid being in a social or a echo chamber and also seeing people in echo chambers is if this motivated belief is happening, where despite what facts or lack of facts or evidence, it's maybe more of opinion pieces, they're calling that motivated belief, where people want it to be true, even though there's nothing that supports the evidence that it is true. And that's something that we can identify and avoid. I'm just sharing that because it's brand new for me. And I still don't even know, as I'm looking at you across the computer lens, I still don't even know what to do with that or how I feel about it. But I thought it was worth mentioning.
Well, and yes, I know what that is, but I've not had those words put to it before. So that's I feel like that kind of defines so many things in today's landscape that I find so frustrating, is this idea that, I want it to be true and I'm going to find all the facts I can to support that it's true, even when it's not true. You know what I mean? So yeah, wow.
Yeah, and I wish this was tidier. I'm not going to lie. I really wish this was more together for me and I had a definitive answer. I don't with this one. Echo chambers is one, as I said earlier, the more I dug, the more there was. And I still don't feel like I have my hands all the way around it, which I should be looking at from a different perspective, which is this. It's exciting that I'll continue to get to chip away at this and learn more from it. I just wish in our conversation there would have been more definitive answers, because I feel like I've brought more questions than answers, or at least new topics and definitions that I don't really know a lot about that I'm going to go and do some more research on. But I think it shows just how complex and how deep this, echo chambers really gets. And I still think there's information that I have not uncovered yet. I'm almost positive there is. But what a very deep and complex term echo chambers. I thought I knew all I needed to know before I started looking into it, and I've discovered that I knew very little. Well,
quite frankly, I think that just puts the microscope on the fact that we really can't be complacent and just assume. We can't assume we know. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of the point of everything that I have watched is, hey, be on guard. This is happening. Know what you're ingesting, understand how to find another source, and be aware of it. And it's like a constant vigilance almost. Like I really do need to watch. I need to watch all of this frequently and say, hey, I'm not going to settle for what's being served to me. I'm going to seek out other stuff too, because that's how I keep myself well-rounded and informed and and open-minded, really. You know what I mean?
Yes. And one thing that I want to make sure I stress here for myself and anybody who's listening is we also need to get in a habit of, when we hear that information that differs from our own beliefs or our own way of thinking, don't just shut it down and walk away and say that person's crazy. At least have enough open-mindedness to listen and to hear them out, not expecting it to change your point of view, but maybe it adds to or it solidifies your point of view. But even to keep yourself open to listen to those different concepts or perspectives is a huge start in moving us in the right direction of getting out of these echo chambers. I know I've been guilty of that in my life, and I'm trying to minimize that more and more. Because again, just because I listen to other thoughts and ideas doesn't mean I have to adopt them as my own. And that's a lesson that I continuously learn daily. Yeah. So as we wrap up today's episode, I just kind of wanted to leave that out there. and that final thought in there. So it was a good discussion though. I love doing this.
As always, Malin, I do appreciate all of the, I know you call it research, and I'm okay with that. I'm not calling that out or anything. So I appreciate all the time that you spend doing that. I really enjoyed the stuff that I found too, and it really made me think about this in a different way. So thanks for bringing that. And with that, we would like to thank you all for joining us today on this episode of Roundtable Mindset. We hope you'll come back and join us again next week as we continue this, continue this deep dive into what brings our perspective into shape. So thanks for joining us today.
Yes, everyone, have a great week. Tell a friend about us. Bring them along to the next episode. We have plenty of chairs around the round table. Until next time, see you guys later. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Malin. Music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Text or call us at 402-819-8999 or join the conversation on Facebook at Roundtable Mindset Podcast.
And never miss a new episode by making sure you like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being our guest today. See you next time at the Roundtable. And remember, your opinions and perspectives matter and are appreciated, but might not always be shared by others, and that's okay.